Hey everyone, welcome back to our channel. Today, we're diving into the chilling and twisted world of crime spree couples. Beyond the infamous Bonnie and Clyde, we'll uncover the stories of 10 other criminal duos whose dangerous liaisons led to shocking and horrifying crimes. From bank robberies and kidnappings to murders and even cannibalism, these partners in crime prove that love can sometimes take a dark turn. So buckle up and join us as we explore the stories of these notorious outlaw lovers who gave love a very bad name. Let's get started. Past Bonnie and Clyde, 10 well-known crime spree pairs. There are killers, bank robbers, kidnappers, and lovers to stay away from. Blake Fitzgerald and Brittany Harper will undoubtedly not be the last criminal combination after Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrow. Some of the most horrific crime sprees have been carried out by outlaw loves, ranging from bank robbery and kidnapping to rape, murder, and even cannibalism. These 10 renowned partners in crime give love a very poor reputation, whether their motivations are commonplace needs to pay the bills, twisted desires to prove their loyalty, or terrifying sexual perversions. Blake Fitzgerald and Brittany Harper robbed hotels, kidnapped people at gunpoint, and stole cars, yet they never killed anyone. Cara, Joseph, and Jenny. Rap sheet. October 2015, 5 banks in 5 states were robbed. Crime history. Although Joseph and Jenny Cara, both 37, appear to be an ordinary suburban couple, they were involved in a bank robbery spree that took place last fall along the East Coast. The duo began their month-long pursuit in Quincy, Massachusetts, and guided law enforcement officials while robbing 5 banks in Massachusetts, Maryland, Delaware, Pennsylvania, and Florida. News sources state that Joseph would typically enter the bank by himself, make quiet demands for huge amounts of money, and claim to be armed, even though he was never observed or found in possession of a gun. Jenny would then drive the getaway car. Jenny had worked at a car dealership where a Buick SUV was purportedly taken. They only took about $15,000 in total from the 5 robberies, so they didn't even get away with much money, but that was all used to feed their heroin addiction, which had already ruined their finances and made them homeless. According to an investigator, the carriers are very troubled, very sick, feeding a habit. They weren't doing this for thrills. They weren't doing this for profit. At last, in late October 2015, they were caught by police during a 90 miles per hour pursuit down I-95 close to Philadelphia International Airport. And when 2 adult Brussels Griffons and their 5 puppies were located in the back seat, investigators learned they weren't alone. Jenny was suspected of helping her husband steal money, and Joseph was charged with 5 counts of felonies related to bank robbery. They agreed to make restitution to the banks they robbed, faced up to 20 years in prison for each offense, and entered a guilty plea in June, according to court records. Williams, Immanuel, and Cara Lee. Rap sheet. From December 2012 to November 2013, 15 bank robberies occurred in Florida and Alabama. Crime history. Immanuel and Cara Lee Williams of Tampa, Florida, discovered they were unable to make ends meet at the end of 2012. Recently, Immanuel had quit his part-time job at the post office, and Cara's job at a bank was not enough to pay their mounting bills from the neighborhood casino. Thus, having only been married for 6 months and expecting a child shortly, the Williams family chose to augment Cara's maternity income by robbing banks. Just 10 days before Williams gave birth, on December 5, 2012, they pulled off their first theft. The duo stole 15 banks in Florida and Alabama together. The robberies decreased after Cara returned to work, yet 2 more occurred on the days she missed work due to illness. The majority of them, reportedly, were perpetrated by Lee, who wore the well-worn wig, hat, and spectacles disguise, which included an afro fake and a cap issued to Seminole Casino regulars. Williams was in charge of composing the demand notes, driving the getaway car, and assisting with the staking out of possible targets. Cara and Immanuel pleaded guilty and are serving 5 and 6 years, respectively, for their crimes, which were ostensibly motivated by financial need, but they also relished the romance of it. During the course of the investigation, police discovered a note that Cara wrote to her husband, referring to their Bonnie and Clyde moments, Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka. Rap sheet. Between 1990 and 1992, the Canadian couple was found guilty of raping and killing 3 women. Bernardo was also found guilty of at least 13 more sexual assaults. Crime history: Carla Homolka and Paul Bernardo, dubbed the Ken and Barbie Killers, were married in 1991 after meeting in 1987. However, Bernardo had a troubling and protracted history of sexual assault prior to their union. In a Toronto suburb, Bernardo sexually assaulted at least 13 women between the ages of 15 and 22 between 1987 and 1990. He also attempted to rape at least 6 additional women, the majority of whom he pursued after they got off buses in the late evening. Although Bernardo was first identified as the Scarborough rapist in 1993, when DNA evidence connected him to the crimes, the police had suspected him in November 1990 after receiving 2 leads indicating that Bernardo matched the composite provided by one of the victims. Bernardo was released the next day, and the samples were merely pushed aside. During his police interrogation, he voluntarily provided samples for forensic examination, and he managed to convince them that he was far more credible than the tipsters, who might just be trying to collect the reward. Bernardo mistreated Homolka physically and psychologically, and she also supported his violent, promiscuous conduct. Homolka assisted Bernardo in drugging, raping, and killing her 15-year-old sister Tammy in her parents' basement in late December 1990. Carla subsequently revealed that she intended to give the teen's virginity to Bernardo as a Christmas present. Although Tammy choked on her own vomit while unconscious, the pair managed to persuade family members and the authorities that the teen's death was an accident. Tammy later passed away at a nearby hospital. A few weeks later, Homolka dressed up as Tammy, and she and Bernardo filmed the now famous video The Fireside Chat, in which they had intercourse on Tammy's bed after talking about how much they enjoyed the crime. They then kidnapped, raped, and killed 3 more teenage girls, filming one of them being tortured and covering the mutilated body of another in cement. When Toronto police eventually examined the blood Bernardo had donated in 1990, they discovered in February 1993 that Bernardo's DNA matched samples of semen taken from 3 of the rape victims. Following a police interrogation in February 1993, Homolka confessed and also implicated her spouse in the murders. In exchange for her cooperation, Homolka accepted a 12-year plea deal and accused Bernardo of as many as 30 further sexual assaults. In 1995, Bernardo was classified as a dangerous offender, which makes it unlikely that he will ever be freed from jail. Nevertheless, he was finally given a life sentence with the chance of parole. In contrast, Carla Homolka was freed from prison in July 2005. Since then, she has gotten married again and given birth to 3 children: Graham Gwendolyn and Wood Catherine May. Rap sheet: January and February 1987, 5 murders. Crime history: known as the Lethal Lovers. Wood and Graham met and fell in love in 1986 while working at a nursing facility. In Wood's story, in early 1987, Graham smothered an elderly Alzheimer's patient to relieve tension. Over the next 2 months, they killed 4 more patients in a similar fashion, in what Wood described as a kind of love ritual, and the deaths were never looked into suspiciously. The pair subsequently separated, but when Wood's ex-husband went to the police in 1988 after she had told him about the murders, their crimes were discovered. In exchange for testifying against Graham, whom she described as the mastermind and perpetrator while she was only a lookout, Wood accepted a plea deal. Graham, on the other hand, maintained that Wood was the one at fault and that she had been tricked into being an accomplice. Graham was ultimately found guilty on 5 murder charges and given 5 life sentences without the chance of release. Wood was given a 40-year prison term after entering a guilty plea to second-degree murder. Although Wood has been eligible for parole since 2005, her release date from jail is June 6, 2021, and she is currently incarcerated in Tallahassee, Florida. Graham is incarcerated in Michigan right now. The hypothesis that Wood was the real mastermind behind the nursing home murders and a cunning psychopath who tricked the jury and prosecution is put out in Lowell Caulfield's 1992 novel Forever and 5 Days. In the book, he provides proof that Wood plotted the killings when she caught Graham with another woman, using Graham as a kind of safety net to ensure she would never be able to leave her. According to Caulfield's book, Wood was prepared to give her life when Graham abandoned her, and she even went so far as to report Graham to the authorities as the mastermind in order to exact retribution. Coleman Alton and Brown Debra. Rap sheet. From May to July 1984, there were 8 homicides, 7 sexual assaults, 3 abductions, and 14 armed robberies. Crime history. Alton Coleman, then 28 years old, had previously been charged with multiple robberies and multiple sex crimes when he and Debra Brown first met in 1983. Brown, on the other hand, was 21 years old and had led a quiet life until then. She had been diagnosed as having borderline mental disability as a kid due to severe head trauma. Brown fled with Coleman when he was charged with the rape and killing of a 14-year-old girl in Illinois at the beginning of 1984. The couple chose to go on a 6-state crime spree rather than stay low, and in just 2 months, the FBI listed them as one of its 10 most wanted due to their involvement in 8 murders, including the deaths of 4 children and 20 sexual assaults. Vanita Wheat, the 9-year-old daughter of a woman Coleman had become friends with in Kenosha, Wisconsin, was abducted on May 29th. This marked the start of the rampage. On June 19th, the little girl's body was found near Waukegan, Illinois, a short distance from Coleman's grandmother's apartment. Coleman and Brown obtained a car after borrowing it from a trustworthy individual they had become friends with. They then proceeded to Gary, Indiana, where they abducted Annie, age 9, and Tamika Erdogan, age 7. While Annie had been sexually attacked by both of the offenders and survived, Tamika's body was unintentionally discovered on the same day as Wheat's. From there, the couple fled across the Midwest, breaking into homes and killing the victims, usually by strangling them, in Michigan, Ohio, and Kentucky. They spent a few days in Dayton, Ohio, staying with a reverend and his wife. Their hosts were unharmed and even took Brown and Coleman to Cincinnati in their car. But soon after, 15-year-old Tani Story vanished while traveling to a junior high school class. Her body was discovered 8 days later, but this time, Coleman's fingerprint, which would eventually turn out to be crucial evidence, provided a clear link to the couple. On July 20th, the pair was apprehended after the FBI located them in Evanston, Illinois. The couple was being sought by law enforcement from 6 states at that point, having committed murder in each. Coleman was eventually given 4 death sentences in 3 different states, a record at the time, while Brown received death sentences in both Indiana and Ohio, though the latter was commuted to life in prison. In April 2002, Coleman was put to death by lethal injection in Ohio, and Brown is currently serving her life sentence there. Bundy, Caril M. and Doug Clark. Rap sheet. In 1980, 7 individuals were murdered. Crime history. In 1980, Caril M. Bundy and Doug Clark met at a bar, moved in together nearly right away, and their relationship soon took a dark turn. Beautiful man in his early 30s, Clark began taking prostitutes home for parties in threesomes. However, Bundy, a plain divorcee 5 years Clark's senior, assisted him in luring the girl back to their apartment after he noticed an 11-year-old neighbor who drew his attention. There, they forced her to play sexual games and pose for pictures. After the pedophilia became monotonous, Clark began talking about his dreams of murdering women while they were having sex, which led them to become the Sunset Strip Killers. On the Sunset Strip in June 1980, Clark abducted 2 adolescent girls, killed them, and raped their corpses before disposing of the remains. When he informed Bundy about the killings, she was alarmed enough to contact the police, but she never disclosed Clark's identity. Clark killed 2 prostitutes 2 weeks later and took one of their heads home as a trophy. This time, before Clark engaged in even more necrophilia, Bundy took on the role of makeup artist, carefully grooming the severed head. Bundy entertained romantic feelings for a local musician named John Murray, in addition to Clark. Bundy eventually revealed some information about her bizarre midnight antics and started to worry that Murray might call the police. So one night after a show, she enticed Murray back to his truck, shot him in the head, and then chopped off his head. However, Bundy eventually lost it and confessed to his co-workers, who then contacted the police. She told the police everything about the ladies she and Clark had slain that summer as soon as she confessed to killing Murray. Bundy was accused of 2 murders, while Clark was accused of 6. Despite Clark's attempts during the trial to blame everything on his girlfriend, Bundy accepted a plea agreement in return for testifying against Clark. Bundy's evidence was crucial in securing Clark's conviction, and he was transported to death row, where he is still today. After receiving a life sentence, Bundy passed away in 2003 from heart failure. Michael Bear Carson and Suzan. Rap sheet. From 1981 to 1983, 3 persons were murdered. Crime history: James Clifford Carson and Susan Barnes Carson appeared to be merely a pair of divorced parents who fell in love and liked to dabble in drugs and mysticism when they first met in the late 1970s. The Carsons may have seemed harmless on paper, but their increasingly strange behavior caused them to become estranged from friends and family. They married, traveled around Europe for a while, and returned home under the new names Michael and Susan Bear, self-described pacifist, vegetarian Muslim warriors. The couple's peculiar moral code was shaped by their eclectic mix of fundamentalist, homosexuality and abortion are causes for death, they once stated, and New Age. Susan thought she could see the future, views, which worsened a drug-induced paranoia. The San Francisco witch killers received their moniker because they were sent by God to kill anyone they thought to be a witch or someone who just got in the way. The Carsons murdered their 22-year-old actress roommate Karen Barnes in March 1981 while residing in San Francisco's Haight-Ashbury area. They did this by stabbing Barnes 13 times, beating her skull with a frying pan, and concealing her body in the basement. Before the body was discovered, they left the Bay Area, and although the police first thought they were suspects, they never made a serious attempt to track them down. Susan subsequently admitted to the murder and denied any regret, stating that Barnes was a witch and needed to be put to death. The Bears relocated to Humboldt County, California, to work on a marijuana farm after hiding out in Oregon until the following spring, when they gained notoriety for their musings about anarchist revolution and impending nuclear holocaust. After an ongoing argument, Michael shot and killed Clark Stevens, a co-worker there. He then set Clark's body on fire in a nearby wood. When Stevens' burned bones and identification were discovered 2 weeks later, the Bears were the top suspects, but they had vanished long ago. 2 years after their witch hunt started, the pair finally hitched a ride from John Charles Hellier in March 1983 as they were hitchhiking close to Bakersfield. Suzan quickly started to believe that he was a witch as well, and when they were traveling down the highway in the suburbs of Los Angeles, fighting broke out in the car. When the three of them pulled over and got out of the car, the altercation intensified. Suzan stabbed Hellier before Michael opened fire, killing the 30-year-old in front of onlookers. Following a swift pursuit by the LAPD, the pair was eventually placed in handcuffs. They were found guilty of all 3 murders during the course of 2 trials, and they were given sentences ranging from up to 50 years to life in prison, naturally in different prisons. According to reports, the couple kept a hit list of well-known witches, including talk show presenter Johnny Carson and former President Ronald Reagan, and investigators suspect they may be linked to almost a dozen other murders in the United States and Europe. They have never apologized for the crimes they committed. Ottis Toole and Henry Lucas. Rap sheet. Toole was found guilty of 6 murders and Lucas of 11, but the couple also confessed to hundreds more deaths, both individually and jointly, as well as cannibalism and arson. Crime history. There is disagreement over the precise number of victims that Henry Lucas and Ottis Toole killed. Lucas was forced to copulate with dead animals by his cruel mother, who had raised him. When he met Toole, a cannibal with only a 5th-grade education, at a soup kitchen in 1976, he had been in and out of jail since he had killed her by stabbing in 1960. They had a sexual relationship quite quickly. Together, they set the bar for deranged serial killer conduct, traveling the nation and kidnapping, raping, and killing people. Henry. Portrait of a Serial Killer, a great film released in 1986, was inspired by their deeds. Toole was convicted of arson in Florida in 1983 and given a 20-year prison term. After being detained for having a lethal weapon 2 months later, Lucas quickly started bragging about the alleged murderous spree he and Toole had carried out together. Toole first denied any involvement, but he subsequently supported Lucas's assertions. Following his conviction for several killings, Toole admitted to numerous more, including the 1981 murder of Adam Walsh, the son of America's Most Wanted star, John Walsh. In 1996, cirrhosis claimed Toole's life in prison. In the meantime, Lucas admitted to hundreds of killings and was found guilty of 11 killings, which included the deaths of 82-year-old Kate Rich and Toole's young niece, Frida Powell. In addition, he was found guilty and given the death penalty for the murder of an unnamed woman who was known as Orange Socks, since that was the only article of clothing that was located on her body. He had assisted in resolving 213 unresolved cases by 1986. However, that year, enough inconsistencies were discovered between Lucas's statements and official information on his location at the time for the Texas Attorney General's office to declare his confessions to be a fabrication. Toole took with him the possibility of discovering the full scope of his offenses when he passed away in prison in 2001. Caril Fugate and Charles Starkweather. Rap sheet. Fugate was an accomplice in 10 of Starkweather's 11 murders to date. Crime history. When 15-year-old Caril Fugate returned home in January 1958 in Lincoln, Nebraska, she found that her 2-year boyfriend, 20-year-old Charles Starkweather, who dressed like a wannabe James Dean, had murdered her mother, stepfather, and infant half-sister. After disposing of the dead, they spent several days inside the residence. The family left and embarked on a bloody road trip throughout the state, perpetrating a string of robberies and 7 more killings before their arrest, as neighbors started to get suspicious of their disappearance. The victims' apparent randomness, they were male and female, young and old, wealthy and impoverished, acquaintances and strangers, added to the horror. Depending on who you believe, Fugate was either Starkweather's hostage, following his instructions out of fear that he would kill her next, or she voluntarily took part in the murders. Following the deaths of Fugate's family members, the pair went to Bennett, Nebraska, to the home of August Meyer, a 70-year-old man. There, Starkweather shot the man dead and viciously tortured his dog until it died. Later that night, Robert Jensen, 17, and his girlfriend Caril King, 16, offered the couple a ride. After Jensen raped King, Starkweather fatally shot both teens and left their bodies in a storm cellar. Fugate would later claim that Starkweather's brutality convinced her that the only way to survive was to obey. After killing 3 people in Lincoln, Nebraska, the two left for Wyoming. Merle Collison had pulled over to the side of the road to take a sleep when Starkweather shot and killed him, tucking his body under the dashboard. Before they could leave, though, a different motorist stopped, believing they needed assistance. When he saw Collison's lifeless body, Starkweather grabbed out his shotgun and the two of them wrestled. Fortunately, a deputy sheriff arrived just in time, causing Starkweather to quickly hop in the car and drive off, leaving Fugate behind. When Starkweather attempted to speed through a nearby town at what was apparently 100 miles per hour, police had already put up a roadblock and were prepared for him. Following a gunfight with law enforcement, he eventually turned himself in. Fugate maintained that she was innocent and had been held captive, but the jury rejected her allegation. Starkweather acknowledged that she was responsible for most, if not all, of the killings. Although Starkweather was only found guilty of 1 murder, he was nonetheless given the capital penalty and put to death in June 1959. Fugate spent 17 years in prison after being found guilty of her part in the killing spree before being freed in 1976. Bruce Springsteen's song, Nebraska, and the film Natural Born Killers were both influenced by their criminal spree. Raymond Fernandez and Martha Beck. Rap sheet. Convicted of 3 murders each, believed to have killed up to 20 women between 1947 and 1949. Crime history. Although a lot of talk has been made about the risks associated with internet dating, using Lonely Heart newspaper advertising to find love didn't make people any safer. After responding to Martha Beck's post in 1947, deadbeat father and thief Raymond Fernandez, who considered himself a ladies' man, quickly won over the single mother of 2. After leaving her kids with the Salvation Army, Beck, 27, flew to New York to live with Fernandez, 33. They were caught in 1949 after killing a young widow named Delphine Downing and her 2-year-old daughter, Raynell, in Michigan, whose disappearance prompted neighbors to call the police. Beck was using the personal ads as a front for their scheme, which involved searching for women to seduce, rob, and eventually murder older women. They went by the moniker Lonely Hearts Killers. There was just enough evidence to charge Beck and Fernandez with 3 murders, despite their boasts of having killed as many as 20 women, who they allegedly found through classified advertising at the same time they marked their robbery victims. Beck is said to have killed Janet Fay in a jealous fit after inviting her to move in with them after Fernandez had seduced her. The other 2 were Delphine and Rochelle Downing in Michigan. However, since Michigan did not have the capital penalty, they were extradited back to New York, where they were found guilty of the single murder and given the death penalty after a trial. Both were killed by electrocution on May 8, 1951. Beck's final remarks were, "What does it matter who is to blame? My story is a love story, but only those tortured with love can understand what I mean. In the history of the world, how many crimes have been attributed to love? Thanks for watching, everyone. If you found these stories as fascinating and eerie as we did, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the world's most notorious crimes. Let us know in the comments which crime spree couple shocked you the most, or if there are any other infamous duos you'd like us to cover. And don't forget to click the bell icon to get notified whenever we post a new video. Stay safe out there, and we'll see you next time.